So Pitt will be back in the South Side today for spring camp practice number 11. They'll have a scrimmage on Saturday, and then next week they'll have 2 days of practice, Tuesday and Thursday, and then the blue gold game on Saturday. And we'll certainly have a lot to talk about over the course of this week and next week about what we learned in spring camp, questions that were asked, questions that were answered, and all those kinds of things. And there's certainly a lot going on the basketball front with transfer portal and trying to land guys and losing guys. And what is it, who are they going to get? Who are they going to lose? Are they going to hold on to the 4 guys that are left? Are they going to, lose some of them? What do they need? All those kinds of things. And we've been talking about a lot of those things, but just kind of generally, a few things I've been thinking about lately, in the last day or two. And so I was like, what should we talk about on the Thursday edition of the Morning Pitt? We obviously have the mailbag tomorrow. We had the live show last night. Yesterday's Morning Pitt was about Jalen Lowe going into the transfer portal. And, there's just a couple different topics. Like you saw the headline of this one. Should Pitt hire a GM, or does Pitt need a GM? I'm recording this before I've actually decided on what the headline of this video is going to be, but it's going to be something like that. Does Pitt need a GM? Should Pitt hire a GM? And the more that I'm thinking about that, I just think there's a lot of interesting tentacles coming out of that question and coming out of this whole new look of college sports. And I mean, every day we talk about how things are changing, how it's never going to be what it was, and it's all different and all those sorts of things. The GM thing and the GM concept as it applies to college sports is one that I've been getting hung up on, particularly this week. And there was some news that sort of spurred it, that caused me to start thinking about this. And, I think leads into a conversation about what Pitt should do. If Pitt needs a GM on the football program or the basketball program or the women's basketball, whatever it might be. And I think there's some interesting sort of angles to explore there. So we got a few thoughts today. Should Pitt hire a GM? What about NIL and, how this all works, how it's going to work once July arrives, when the House settlement is really finally kind of put into place? What does it all look like? So we got, I should have called this 5 thoughts. 5 thoughts on the new structure of college sports as it relates to Pitt. Most specifically, does Pitt need a GM, or should Pitt hire a GM? And what does that all mean for everything? So a bunch of different thoughts, some different things to think about and talk about today here on the Thursday edition of the Morning Pitt. YouTube.com/Panther-Lair.com. Yes, Thursday, it's the Morning Pitt, youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com. I'm Chris Peak from Panther-Lair.com. You should know that by now. The website, Panther-Lair.com. It's the most comprehensive source of Pitt sports news on the internet. Football, basketball, and recruiting. You find it all at Panther-Lair.com. And message boards to hang out with other Pitt fans. All day, every day, Pitt fans are hanging out on the message boards at Panther-Lair.com and talking about Pitt sports. So go check it out, Panther-Lair.com. And of course, like we ask you to do, like this video and subscribe to youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com, and you won't miss any of our Pitt video content. We have these daily morning Pitt videos every day of the week, Monday through Friday. We have our weekly live show like we did last night, Wednesday night, 8:30 to 9:30. And then we have interviews and press conferences and post-game shows and all kinds of things, all kinds of good video content for you to consume right here at youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com. So make sure you like and subscribe today. So the thing that got me thinking about this question of should Pitt hire a GM, what would it mean if Pitt hired a GM? Does Pitt already have a GM? And the thing that got me thinking about this was the news. I forget when it came out, earlier this week or late over the weekend or whenever it was, that Stanford was hiring Frank Reich to be the coach. What does this have to do with Pitt? What does this have to do with anything? Well, what was interesting is that hire was made effectively by the GM, by Andrew Luck. Of course, former Indianapolis Colts quarterback, worked with Frank Reich with the Colts. So, I mean, there was obviously a connection there. Luck himself, a Stanford alum, and all these different things. You understood why, they had to make a late firing of Troy Taylor after various accusations of improper conduct. Stanford was scrambling, and they go out and hire Frank Reich basically as like a 1-year fill-in. And I think it was even presented as such, that it was a 1-year temporary hire, like a 1-year interim coach to sort of keep the program afloat while they look for their new coach. And it was Andrew, but what was interesting to me is that it was Andrew Luck who made this hire. And when you read quotes from the introductory press conference. You read quotes about hiring Frank Reich. You read quotes about firing Troy Taylor. It's all Andrew Luck talking. It's Andrew Luck talking in a position of decision-making power. It's not the athletic director, although I think that, the athletic director chimed in. It's not, the chancellor and all these things, although all those people are involved. It's Andrew Luck making the hire. And that's really interesting to me because, as over the last year, 2 years or so, as the whole sort of structure of college sports has evolved, we've gotten to talking about general managers and GMs being a part of the college sports and our industry, I guess maybe is the best word to say. And I never really knew what that looked like. We know what the GM looks like in pro sports. We know what the GM's role is, and we know how they kind of fit into everything. But, I always wondered, are we just using that term as sort of a catch-all for this different responsibility of managing NIL budgets and managing rosters and things like that? Is it really going to be like on the pro model, or is it this own sort of unique thing, this own thing that's unique to college sports? And I kind of lean toward, it's just sort of this unique thing. We're calling it a general manager, but it's not really a general manager like it is in pro sports. But then we have Andrew Luck making firings and hirings, doing introductory press conferences about why Frank Reich is the best guy to carry on this program. And I think I realized, holy crap. Some of these schools, maybe not all, not yet, but some of these schools are really going for it with that kind of pro model. Of a general manager assembling the talent, of a general manager putting together the team, and a general manager making decisions like hiring and firing coaches. And I think that opened up a whole new way of thinking for me about what this enterprise is going to look like over the next 5 years. Because, so something else I've been doing lately, and I get sucked into these Facebook reels or shorts or whatever they are, and they'll show me a 90-second clip from The Sopranos or something, and I just devour. It's exactly what they're created to do, is to be addictive. So you just keep watching one after another, and they totally got me. Breaking Bad clips, Sopranos clips, all this stuff, totally got me on these things. And somehow the algorithm decided I should start seeing clips from Moneyball, and a few of the clips I've been fed, because I can't say I chose to watch them, I just got fed them, were some of the clips between Brad Pitt and Philip Seymour Hoffman, between Billy Beane and Art Howe, and some of the conversations they're having. There's one particular where Billy Beane, the general manager, is talking to Art Howe, the coach of the Athletics, and saying, this is the team I built for you. You need to use it the way it was intended to be used when I built this team. And Art Howe is saying, well, I want to use guys the way I want to use guys. And there was a clear separation between acquiring talent, roster construction, and then deploying that roster. And so, you have to look at it from my perspective. I'm getting this reminder of this exchange between Billy Beane and Art Howe, and then on one side, and on the other side, I'm seeing Andrew Luck, who's not the athletic director, not the chancellor, the university president, or anything like that, talking about making hires. And I'm saying, by God, they're really moving toward this model. And then, my mind starts connecting to Pitt. And I start envisioning Pat Narduzzi in this kind of situation where he's answering to not the athletic director. Well, he's answering to the athletic director, but he's not answering directly to the athletic director. He's not answering directly to the chancellor. He's answering to a general manager. And we've heard different things about pushback. I think some coaches not wanting that kind of a structure, because who wants to hire themselves a new boss? Who wants to add a new boss? Whatever appeal there might be for a college football coach or a college basketball coach, whatever appeal there might be in maybe washing your hands a bit of all the NIL dealings and the budgets and all those different things, and the dealing with agents and the dealing with kids asking price and all that, while it might be appealing to be able to step away from those things, the idea of bringing in someone to be your boss probably doesn't sit quite as well, And so I think that you've seen different struggles over the year. I shouldn't say over the years. This is all relatively recent, but you hear stories about a bit of a power struggle of whether you want, of where that GM is going to sit in the food chain? Are they between the head coach and the athletic director? Are they in there, or are they a step down? Is it athletic director to head coach to the GM? And I think we'll be in this transition period here where nobody's really sure about how the GM fits in, but slowly and surely over the next few years, I think you'll see most schools take on this structure of having the GM report directly to the athletic director and have some responsibility for the hirings and firings of the head coaches, which, not to mention the roster construction and putting the teams together. And then you hire the coach who can come in and coach those players that you've assembled for them. This is going to be a major change and a major adjustment for veteran head coaches. I mean, like, guys like Pat Narduzzi and Jeff Capel have been in coaching for a long time. Narduzzi longer than Capel, but they've both been in coaching for a long time. And they've been around programs that have been established for a long time. Capel at Duke, Narduzzi at Michigan State. Like, they've got a lot of experience in college sports being run one way. And what we're headed toward is a very different way of running things. And not just because the players are getting paid, not just because of NIL, but a totally different way of structuring the whole thing. And I don't know how well veteran coaches will take to that. I think younger coaches coming up will take to it better. They'll come to just understand it as that's what the structure is. If Pitt were to hire a GM for football, someone who reported directly to Alan Green, the athletic director, and that the head coach reported to him, if they were to hire that person on June 1st, I think it would take a pretty significant period of adjustment for Pat Narduzzi, but a younger coach on his staff, somebody he might hire in the next year or two, would just sort of come to understand it as that's the way things are. And so eventually you would get to this point where all the coaches would understand it as that's the way things are. But for some of these veteran coaches, it's going to be pretty hard. It's going to be pretty difficult to adjust to that. And I think a lot of them are going to want to have that GM who can handle the NIL and the budget and the player price demands and all these different things, but have that GM work for them, not them working for the GM. Of course, you could then take this even another step down the road and get into a question of, does the role of the athletic director inherently change? Does it become something different than what it is right now? Does it become more of just a financial person, somebody who can, a bean counter, somebody who can move the money around to make sure everything's getting funded in terms of facilities and scholarships and this and that, but have less responsibilities when it comes to hiring coaches, less responsibilities when it comes to actually administering and administrating the different sports. If you now have, you could almost see it as the athletic director becoming kind of a head coach with a bunch of coordinators underneath them, right? That there's all the GMs of all the sports report to the athletic director. And the athletic director doesn't really have that direct contact or communication or connection with the head coaches. Their connection is through the general managers. Like, all of this seems plausible, and particularly if they start streamlining these athletic departments, you're going to get down to what's really essential. And I mean, you could see athletic department staff whittled down, on the administrative side, and ultimately replaced by general managers who can perform these sort of operations. And it's kind of crazy to envision. It's kind of crazy to think about. But 5 years ago, if we would have been talking about, well, what's the budget for players this year? How much does Pitt have to use? And how much does Jalen Lowe's departure for the transfer portal affect their NIL budget or their available budget? I mean, we would have said that's a crazy concept. If we were talking when Jordan Addison left, and that was only 3 years ago, if we were talking at that point, well, Pitt's got to replace him. What does that do to their NIL budget? We would be like, that's silly, because we weren't talking, nobody was thinking in those terms back then. I mean, maybe there were a few forward-thinking people who were, but for the most part, nobody was really thinking in those terms back then. And the money also wasn't crazy like it is today. I mean, like, you think back to 2021, what some of the NIL deals were, I mean, it pales in comparison. There are guys who probably played in 2021 who are like, damn, I wish I played 2 years later because I would have gotten paid, like seriously paid. But unfortunately for them, they played in 2021, not 2023. But 4 years ago, 5 years ago, we would never be having that kind of conversation about budgetary concerns and how much is available. And if they have this much allocated to this guy and he goes into the portal, what can they then do to spread that around? We would never have been having those kinds of conversations. Right now, I don't think we're talking about how, the entire hierarchy and food chain and organizational chart, right? Isn't that what they're called? Org charts, right? In like the business world, right now, we can't really conceive of that kind of an organizational chart that looks vastly different from what you have right now. But 5 years from now, we could see it. It could be the athletic director, 3 or 4 GMs of your most prominent sports, your football, your men's basketball, depending on the school, maybe your women's basketball or your baseball or your lacrosse or your volleyball, depending on the school. And then you could have an administrator or 2 administrators who sort of oversee all the other sports that will effectively be relegated to club sports. And what you end up with is these like one big umbrella organization of the athletic department and a bunch of these sort of individual pro sports franchises. And then maybe you don't even have the umbrella of the athletic department. You have, the umbrella of the athletic department that more or less oversees what are effectively club sports. And then you've got these, the football program is its own department, and the men's basketball program is its own department. It's almost separate from the athletic department altogether. You start considering the possibilities of where this is all going, and it's a fracturing of the structure that's been in place for, I don't know, how long have there been athletic departments like structured the way they are today? 50 years, 70 years, 40 years, I don't know, decades. We would certainly say decades that this current structure has been in place. And you're talking about potentially heading down a path where it's no longer, it's not structured that way anymore. Now, what'll be interesting to see is how the revenue sharing side of it kind of affects the structuring in that organizational chart. Because if you're talking about 20% or 22% of all athletic department revenue that has to be shared, well, now you're going to need collaboration among men's basketball and football where that money is going to be spent the most, right? You're going to need some kind of decision on how to divvy that money up. But at the same time, I sort of feel like the current revenue sharing model that's going to go into place in July is a temporary fix at best. And I think they'll find something different. And, I think you could even end up seeing it, by sport, that 22%, you can share up to 22% of the revenue that your sport brings in, which would further fracture the athletic departments and create these little autonomous units of individual sports. Future's so bright, got to wear shades. I don't know. Or it could go a completely different way, but that's sort of how it feels to me. The answer to the question of should Pitt hire a GM? Does Pitt need a GM? I don't know if like should or need, I don't know if either one of those really matter. It's probably what's going to happen. It's where they're headed, because it's where everybody else is headed too. And there'll be a GM who fires Pat Narduzzi one day or hires his replacement one day or whatever it may be. There'll be a GM who handles men's basketball. We'll see. It's going to be interesting. But if you want to get your resume together to be a general manager for the Pitt football program or the Pitt men's basketball program, start getting the template out right now. All right, tomorrow we'll have our mailbag, so make sure you want to get questions in. Go to Panther-Lair.com on the Between Fifth and Forbes message board. We have a thread up. It's got a bunch of replies already, so put your question in there, and we'll answer as many as we can in the mailbag tomorrow. Make sure you like this video and subscribe to youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com. Thanks for watching today. I hope you've had a good week so far. Tomorrow's Friday. It's always something to look forward to. So enjoy your Thursday. We'll catch up with you tomorrow for the Morning Pitt mailbag right here on youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com.